was a junior in high school, I was at a friend's house for a party. Her parents were out of town. And it wasn't like a rager. It was just like a dozen people. I think some of them were drinking beer. I didn't drink then. I was a good youth group going boy, card carrying, true love waits, virgin. So I was hanging out with my best friend Yibby, and I get kind of bored. So I was like, hey, let's go somewhere. They were like, yeah, let's go run up to 7-Eleven. So we run up to 7-Eleven, and Yibby starts talking about Rocky Horror Picture Show. Now, I had never gone to Rocky Horror Picture Show. Was a very sheltered, naive young man. You know, whatever Yibby and the girls wanted to do, I was game. So we're driving around. We're at the stoplight. This car next to us starts revving its motor. I start revving my motor because I drive an 82 Mustang, black with a red pinstripe. Anyway, floor it when the light turned green and absolutely crush him. Just crush him right off the line. As we pull up to the next stoplight, I'm thinking I can like look over and kind of, give him my smug look. And as I look over, bang, and then they peel off. And we're thinking, oh my God, am I shot? Who's shot? Are you shot? So none of us were shot. We figured it must have been a rock. And when we got to Rocky Horror Picture Show, I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't a guy in lingerie. Before the movie, they do this thing called the Virgin Auction. And in the Virgin Auction, they bring up all the people who are new to Rocky Horror, which was me. And they go down the line and they auction each one off one at a time. And the offers that come back are usually pretty disgusting. Like pubic hairs of, Donald Trump. That would be one today that you would offer that people would be like, oh, that's horrible. And, that could actually win. So they go down the line, they get to me, and silence. Nobody wants to buy me. And me, I was crushed. Like, part of me was just like, why am I not worth anyone's pubic hairs? And so afterward, Yibby runs up to the front and is talking to Dr. Frankenfurter, who's now dressed in like black leather, everything, chains, piercings, just the youth group would not approve. Yibby invited them to go to Steak and Shake with us, and so we did. After Steak and Shake, we decided to head back to Katie's house and go check on things. Seems kind of quiet. And everybody disperses, and Yibby and Dr. Frankenfurter go off and hang out. And I hang back in the living room. All of a sudden, there's like these older guys that I don't recognize. And I was like, hey, do you guys know, are you supposed to be here? And they're not. My inner Hulk is getting released. And so I'm like, you guys got to leave. You have to leave. You can't. This isn't your house. This isn't your stuff. And they're like, settle down, little guy. We're going to take care of this. And I was a little guy at the time, by the way. And there's 5 of them. And they're all standing beside me, and I'm like, you guys gotta go. Oh, we're gonna kick your ass. We're gonna, you want? And I know that, I'm about to get my ass kicked. It's inevitable at this point. Like, I don't really even know what I'm gonna do. I'm just talking tougher and tougher, and hoping that my tough talk, that one, they don't call my bluff, and that I call theirs. But fortunately, that's when Dr. Frankenfurter came out. Not the kind of guy I would bring to youth group, but definitely the kind of guy I would bring to an ass whooping contest. And those guys knew it too. And they start, going out the door. Yo, we'll kick your ass. We know where you live. The next week, Yibby wants to go back to Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I'm game. Like, now that I know what's actually happening, I'm pretty excited. And we get there. And Dr. Frankenfurter sees me in the back of the thing. And he's, come get her. And so he calls me down. And he's like, dude, it's the ass kicker, man. I can't believe you're not going to believe. He's telling everybody what happened. And so I'm, feeling pretty like 10 feet tall at this point. And then he's like, all right, let's do, last week, you weren't auctioned off last week, were you? It's all right. It's not a big deal. It's nobody inside. He lines us up and he puts me first. And he's like, let me tell you about this little ass kicker. Last week we were at a party. And he, tells them the whole story. And at the end he goes, this guy has balls the size of church bells. Having balls the size of church bells from Dr. Frankenfurter, that's really the honor that I'll put on my grave probably. So they auction me off and it goes much better for me. The nose hair clippings of Henry Kissinger, and I finally get sold for Richard Nixon's testicles in a mason jar. It was a touching moment. And it's one that I'll always remember. It'll always be one of my favorite stories from growing up. But it's not just a fun story, of my youth. It's really a summary of me, who I am, and my ADHD. It shows you my impulsive side, definitely. Getting restless at a party, and then there was the racing. It shows the risk taking that's inevitable with impulsiveness. Then there's the hyperactivity, needing to go somewhere, needing to drive fast, just needing constant stimulation. Then you can definitely see rejection sensitivity, particularly at the auction when I felt defeated because nobody would bid on me, and something that's so ridiculous. And then the justice sensitivity is seeing my friend's house being taken advantage of by assholes and being like, someone has to stand up for this. May as well be me. With justice sensitivity, you don't really think through, the logic of it. It's just you have to respond. You see something that's wrong and you have to address it. This one story, it tells you who I am.
Wait! Who are you?
My name is Shannon, and I am co-founder of weareadhd.com. It's just a blogging community that is focused on ADHD. And there's a lot of, some people cover the science of it. Some people write poetry. And some people, most of us, share our stories. Like, telling my story didn't feel right for some reason. There's privilege. I'm a white, cis, hetero, male, middle class. Like, I'm at the top of the privilege pile. And if any story has been covered to explain ADHD, it's mine. I struggle with that, where I feel like your story's been told, other people need to share, and there needs to be room for other people. With We Are ADHD, it's been a priority of mine to find people to blog who aren't me, because my experience, is overrepresented in ADHD culture. My story by itself doesn't really contribute anything. I mean, we know teenage boys with ADHD who are in the middle class will probably race cars because, they can scrounge together the money for an attorney and if they get in trouble, and they're not going to get arrested and have to go to jail for, 20 years. So my story, it's not important by itself. But that's why with We Are ADHD, we invite more voices that aren't overrepresented, the ones that are underrepresented, people who have an experience with ADHD that I wouldn't even begin to be able to understand or imagine until they share it. And it's important to me that we have a place for that. There's a depth of experience between us that goes far beyond just my experience and my stories. And I'm so grateful that I've been able to play a part in that and make that space. And I'm really floored by a lot of the stories that I've heard. They're having the courage to come forward and dig deep into their past and share what makes them them. And in that, we're learning more about ADHD. Also, there's this illusion of normalcy that the things you grew up experiencing are inherently normal to you. And it's not until you start sharing those stories that you think are normal with other people that you begin to learn how not normal it is. That illusion of normalcy can convince you, oh, everybody has heard this. And so you just give up. You just say, nobody wants to hear this. Well, it's not true, especially with ADHD. Like, the experiences we have aren't normal for neurotypical culture. Everybody's story, especially when you're talking about ADHD, has insights and wisdom in it. And then there's an inferiority complex and imposter syndrome. When you share your story, you can kind of come down hard on yourself. It's kind of like the normalcy thing, except it's personal. It's I'm the problem. That the stories I tell they don't have the significance I think they have, or they're not as revelatory as I think they are, or your stories are inadequate, and therefore your sharing of those stories is meaningless and pointless. And it's something that you struggle with, not just in telling your story. Imposter syndrome can affect every aspect of your life. Finally, there's a feeling that, to contribute meaningfully to the ADHD conversation, you need to have facts, and you need to have numbers, and you need to have data, and you need to have the research to back up what you're saying. And that's just not true. Stories aren't facts, but stories can play a bigger role in illuminating facts. And so those are all the reasons that we kind of discount our stories and suppress them and just kind of keep them to ourselves. But what I want to share with you, written down on this really large piece of paper is all the reasons why they do matter. And this is not a comprehensive list. To start with, I want to address the last one first, and that's that stories aren't facts. And while that's true, there is a lot of research that shows that storytelling is a better method of teaching science and facts than just laying out numbers and data and charts, which are nice, but it's the stories that bring it to life. And so it's this great quote I found in one of those studies. When new scientific findings are presented as stories, communicators are obliged to put findings in a broader societal context, which helps audiences organize and process new information. Stories help people to understand complicated concepts and make science more relevant to their everyday lives. Stories matter to science. Stories make science accessible. Also, if we don't tell our stories, other people will. And by other people, I don't mean other people with ADHD. I'm a big believer that we need more voices, more ADHD stories, not fewer. But if we don't tell our ADHD stories, like movie writers and book writers and people who know someone with ADHD, or maybe are a parent of someone with ADHD, and they think they understand it, they'll tell our stories. We've seen this especially with the autism community, where non-autistic people will appropriate autistic stories and just botch it. Just completely see ya. I mean, come on. Part of counteracting that is putting our own stories out there more. Whether you're autistic or ADHD, telling your story fills that void that neurotypical people, that they will fill. I think telling our stories is the best way to make sure that the real stories are out there. Sharing your story is important because sharing is healing. I do share those stories a lot of the times I've been hurt by people, especially, growing up. And I think that has a very healing property, especially when other people realize or share how similar their experience was too. Makes you feel not alone. Like at the time I experienced it, it was really shitty. And I felt totally alone. But putting that out in the world and having people participate in that story and know that story, it resonates with them, it's almost like the kid in me who went through that is no longer alone feeling that. So I think sharing your story, even the hard ones, it's a part of healing. It can be a part of healing to share that with people. Stories help bring us together as a community, the ADHD community, and it helps us understand ourselves and each other. Having ADHD, for me, meant a lot of time in isolation, and I was okay with that. Like, I enjoy my company. I think I'm a pretty delightful son of a bitch. Part of me is like not sad that I spent so much time alone, but part of me is. Part of me is like, it's bullshit. As I've shared my stories on Twitter and my blog, and people have come out and shared theirs, like, I don't feel as alone. Even if it's just internet people. Like, those are real people. They're my friends. And they understand me in a way that no other friend really has. Like, the friends I've had are just kind of holding on for dear life as I go charging into whatever I'm doing. But these people do understand me, and this community does get me, and I get them. And it's this mutual understanding that has suddenly made life so much more understandable, It's made my small normal fit into a larger normal, and then we all within our larger normal don't fit into the greater normal. We're our own little, circle of freaks. And I like that. For once, it's not just me in the circle of freaks. It's all of us. And that's why your stories matter. And that's why my story matters. It matters because we've all been through a lot of shit, especially when we were young. We've had a lot of difficult things to deal with. We've had a lot of betrayal and heartbreak, confusion, loneliness, and having people to share that with and learn about how they have an experience that rhymes with mine. It's making all the difference for me. And I hope that it makes all the difference for you. Thanks for coming to my talk.